I have a bit of a problem. See, I've got my character here, but I want them to be over here. How do I get them from one place to another?
Go look!
Nah, I've done that already. I got it! Walking! Along with talking, it's one of those things animated characters tend to do quite a bit, so let's take some time and make a pony walk. Well, before we do anything else, I highly recommend downloading this massive pack of show assets gathered by Drud14. There's plenty of stuff to check out and see how all the pieces and parts work, from the main 6 to random birds and bunnies. There's even a Celestia or two in there if you want to see all the crazy stuff that goes into making your mane and tail. It's definitely going to speed up my work, especially since there's walk cycles already in here.
Easy peasy. My game is officially back on.
So I took the Applejack walk cycle and cleaned up the symbol names and duplicate pieces and such so it's a little easier to work with. Why Applejack, you say? No particular reason. A four-legged walk cycle really isn't all that different from a two-legged one. If we look at just the front legs for now, we can see the basic principles of a two-legged walk. There's the contact positions where the foot touches the ground, and the passing position where the leg crosses over. The timing here is pretty standard at 2 steps a second, so 24 frames for the whole cycle. The important thing to remember for a four-legged cycle is that when one set of legs is in the contact position, the other set is in the passing position, and vice versa. And obviously the steps are offset. Both legs on one side aren't moving at the same time. Well, unless you're this guy. Even though in reality for reusable cycles like this you'd most likely animate the character walking in place and slide them around later, I'm going to also show things actually moving forward to make things a little easier to see. And note that I've separated the character into just a handful of layers. One for the head, the torso, the tail, each leg, and a ground shadow. That means no motion tweens, but it sure beats wrangling 40 different layers. The good thing about this setup is that I can easily copy the near legs, offset the frames, and paste them in again as the far legs.
Very efficient.
If we throw in the breakdowns, we can see where the leg comes out before stepping down, and where it's held back before coming up. And note how the curve of the leg reverses in the movement. Ditto for the back legs. It takes a fair bit of symbol building to get that extra flexibility in flash animation. And here it is with in-betweens to smooth out the movement. There, walking from one side of the screen to the other. Very slowly.
This is way too boring for me.
Let's move on to a trot, which is a fair bit faster at 16 frames, and adds a lot of energy by getting the character up off the ground. In this case, the leg actually crosses over on the contact, and what would normally be the passing position is where the character is up in the air and the legs are furthest apart. These bent front legs are a lot easier to work with, since they're made from separate pieces, so I don't have to go build a new symbol every time I change something. And most of the other leg positions were copied from the walk cycle with little or no alterations. I believe this one is the only leg in the cycle that I drew from scratch. If you take a look at the near front leg, notice how it's held back through the middle of the motion. The back leg is also held forward in the middle. Keeping the legs fairly still while the character is up off the ground helps give it that light feeling. It also gets a nice snappy feel by keeping the legs bent until just before the contact with the ground. The breakdowns separate the leg contacts so both legs aren't hitting the ground at the same time, which would make it less of a trot and more of a skip. And here it is smoothed out. Now we can move on to the run, which is of course even faster, in this case only 8 frames. But here's the weird thing about the standard My Little Pony run. It isn't one. A run, I mean. If you look at each of the frames in the cycle, at no point are all 4 legs off the ground. Ha! Take that, Edward Muybridge! Well, despite invalidating the foundations of motion pictures, I can see why they did it this way. As it is, each foot is only on the ground for 2 frames, which is the bare minimum to actually be seen in motion. And given how short the cycle is, it'd be quite distracting to have big up and down movements, especially if you have characters in close shots talking. There's really not all that much I can say about this cycle. Each leg is wheeling around offset evenly from the others. The leg movements do favor the contact some to help it read a little better, and you can see that the head bobs along with the front legs with a little bit of counteraction, tilting downward as it goes up. And here it is completed, and that's it. That said, it would be nice to actually show a proper gallop. Now I know I saw a gallop in here somewhere. Aha! Since this time we do have some up and down movement, we'll need a few more frames to pull it off. 12 in this case. The leg positions for the gallop are actually the same as the run. There's just a few more of them. The biggest difference between this and, say, a walk or a trot is that the two front or back legs work more in unison. Instead of the steps being evenly spaced, they're only 2 frames apart. So the 2 key positions when it comes to a gallop are the legs close together and the legs far apart. And here you can already see a little bit of counteraction on the tail. Up when the body goes down, and down when the body goes up. When you add in the breakdowns, you can see the extra foot contacts and start to see the thrust of the movement as the legs push the body forward. And looking at the tail again, you can start to see a wave forming as the end of the tail lags behind the root. It's all functionally there now, so here it is with in-betweens. There, 4 different ways to get from here to there. This probably doesn't make a ton of sense with me just talking about it, but don't worry. There's a ton of source files available in the description for you to go through frame by frame. For each cycle, there's versions with all the frames and ones with just the keys and breakdowns. For both versions that move across the screen and ones that slide in place. And I was able to back off a version and make Flash 8 compatible files. I've also added Flash 8 compatible files to some of my earlier videos, and there's even some proper zip lines built in Illustrator rather than the finest in paint and construction paper. So between this and the resource pack, we've all got plenty of toys to play around with this summer.